They want it to be a secret network of Illuminati spies that will use higher levels of aggression to infiltrate and spy on Freemasons, on all the Freemason lodges across Germany.
Welcome back. I'm here again with a perennial favorite, Dr. David Morehouse.
Hey, Sean. Doing, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you again, too, brother. All right, so what are we talking about today?
Well, you and I discussed the Illuminati, and I think I was just telling you that this kind of stemmed from my journey into Freemasonry. When I came out of the Army in 95, I started teaching remote viewing, and I was teaching it to law enforcement officers. And Freemasonry is big in a lot of law enforcement circles. And in this particular town in New Jersey, where I was teaching the entire police force there in coordinate remote viewing, these guys dragged me into, like through a hedge backward into Freemasonry and started me through that process there. To which I'll be very honest with you, I was conflicted because I didn't know anything about it. I had read a bunch of different books on it, and many of the books were conspiratorial. They were negative. They were empowering it as like this great mystical, horrible, of the devil kind of thing to control humanity and control countries and to do all these different things. And so I kind of came into it front loaded with that. And then I sort of determined while I was there, I determined while I was there that it could be basically one of two different things, depending upon if you understood the mission of Freemasonry or not. And the mission of Freemasonry is a school for manhood. It's to teach you to be a better man. Because, we were saying it, that women have a very defined line in their life, in the biology of their life, when they stop being a girl and become a woman. And men do not have that. And Freemasonry, stepped up to adopt that in its very basic ideology. It was a school for manhood. It was to teach you how to live a reflected life, how to live a life of service, of commitment, of ethics, morality, of science and mathematics, geometry, astronomy, physics. And that was the path that you were taking. And one guy described the path that I was on as a school for mysticism, which I was uncomfortable with that at the time because I had just come out of the military. I'm less uncomfortable with it now, but that's what I understood it to be. There's another track you can take in it, as I was telling you, it's much more dictatorial. It's much more of just a protocol, and you're basically told what to understand and what to know. I liked the other track because it wasn't somebody telling me what to know. It was somebody telling me that this was the lesson that I needed to study. And then I had to sit down and regurgitate in front of a 33-degree Mason, or 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 of them. And they would ask me very poignant questions about the lesson. And if I did not answer them as deeply, as philosophically, as truly, or as powerfully as they expected me to, they'd send me back to do it again. You didn't progress, right? Mm-hmm. But it was teaching me how to review my thoughts, how to review my words, how to review my actions, my interactions, and how to refine them and hone them, and to be a better human, a better man with other men and with women, with children, the whole thing. I got more out of it, honest to goodness, than I ever got out of being in the Mormon Church, which Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, Brigham Young, all of those guys were Freemasons.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Bain Books at Bain.com.
They were all Freemasons. And the rituals that are done in the temple of the LDS Church are identical to the rituals that are done in Freemasonry. So that was how I got to this understanding where I was. And I did this, it might have been like a 6-hour presentation on Clubhouse a few years ago, which was well received because I think it took away a lot of the mystique and the corrupted ideology that people are corrupted opinions and conspiracy that people throw on it by the misinformed or somebody who just reads something that's an exaggerated commentary on it that doesn't address any of the things that I just shared. And they asked me to take it to the Illuminati because that's the one that everybody really thinks is the big evil doing institution that tries to control the planet and humanity on the planet and control governments and, countries, etc. And so I really did not have a big interest in that because it didn't exist anymore. But I dug into it and did a deep dive for months, studying it and understanding what it was, where it came from, because I wanted to try to demystify it for people and be able to say, hey, it's nothing like what you're being told it is. It never was anything like you're being told it is. So now let me give you the truth about what it is and what it was and for how long it was and who invented it and why they invented it. And that lecture, which ended up being another 4 hours, that too ended up being well received. Although there are always the diehard conspiracy theorists that want nothing, they don't want to hear that. It doesn't matter how much truth you give them, they don't care. Because what they're doing is their life is defined, the purpose of their life, because they ascribe that to themselves, is looking for a reason to be offended about something, right? To point a finger and say, that's corrupt, and that's twisted, and that's evil, and that's something else. They have nothing to back it up on, except maybe something they read on the internet or some, God knows what else. They don't have the personal experience of it, and they certainly aren't looking at it from a historical perspective or an academic perspective. They're looking at it from a knee-jerk, reactionary, I need to be offended by something type of uninformed lunacy that they put that stuff out there in. So I guess what I would ask is for the listeners, and I love your listeners and viewers, is to push the pause button and listen to what we're talking about here. And by all means, look up anything that I'm going to tell you in this lecture, and you can double check it. But don't build your argument based on conspiracy and uninformed individuals who don't know, but who are very happy to jump up and, grab another 15 minutes of fame by stirring the pot and making everybody run around, set their hair on fire. So the Illuminati has this huge connotation of being this evil thing, as I said. But really what it's based on, and I want to quote, and I always mispronounce the German names, so you can correct me, Adam Weishaupt. Is that it? Weishaupt? Okay. He says... Haupt. Okay. Yeah. Adam Weishaupt, who was the founder, said there are certain truths, holy truths, that enlightened men know about their past, present, and their future condition. They most certainly exist. In each century, they veiled their teachings. This diseased world requires help. To act is therefore our first purpose. In other words, the diseased world that he's talking about is what? Well, first of all, we're talking about the 1700s, and we're talking about Bavaria. And we're talking about in Europe at that particular time, the Catholic Church owned most of the land in all of the countries there.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
The Catholic Church dictated what you could read, what you could not read, what words you could use, what words you could not use, what art you could look at, what art you could not look at, and it all carried heavy consequences. They dictated to kings, to monarchies, how they should run their countries and how they should treat their people, where the money came to pay homage back to the church, etc. So these were Adam and the people that began this with him, young men, were rebels of a sort. They felt oppressed, stood upon by the church. They couldn't own land because all of it was owned by the church. And if it wasn't owned by the church, it was owned by very wealthy landowners who were affiliated with the monarchies in some way or huge business owners in some way. And they were looking for a way to try to make a mark, to change that for themselves. That's how they got involved in this. So this disease world requires help, as Adam says. The act is therefore our first purpose. Our two act is therefore our first purpose, to make the world better and wiser. We do not recruit for our own benefit. I'll dispute that later in the lecture. This is a labor worthy of the holy legion of better men. Remember what I just said Freemasonry was about. Now they're talking about a holy legion of better men. It's still affiliated with Christianity, if you will. Dangerous not to be aligned with Catholicism at that time. But they believed in holy and they believed in God. They believed in a higher power. They believed in all those things. They were not satanic, dark worshipers of those kinds of things. They weren't. They just were not. This was a young man whose mother and father died when he was 5 years old. And so his godfather is the guy that raised him and took care of him. And he was in a university, which was a Jesuit university, and his godfather was the censor of the literature in a Jesuit university, which he brought Adam in with him when Adam was there. And Adam was studying law, studying canon law, and he had a bunch of friends who were studying canon law with him. And they got this bright idea that around in 1776, right as the birth of our country, Adam and his friends, about 4 of them, they decided that they needed to form a secret club. Why was it secret? Because you would get your ass handed to you by the church or by the monarchy. If you went out, you couldn't hang a banner out and say, we're about this. We're about, agrarian reform. That means land reform. We're about these kinds of things and ownership and freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of what we want to read. And Adam kind of got this spirit, I guess, maybe from, you can't say he got it from his father and mother really because they died when he was 5. But his godfather, who was the censor for the library, for the university, had this list of books that he always had to read. And then he would have to be the guy based on what the church said. This book can't be read. It cannot be in the library. But he had read it. So what he was doing is he was taking the burn stack, the really burned stack, and then the burned stack that he would then call Adam over and say, hey, this is not going to go on the shelves in the library, but this is a really cool book. You need to read this book because it's like, it's going to blow your mind. So you need to read this book. So Adam would read the book and then he would share it with his other canon law students. And they just started getting more and more motivated to explore these ideas. They wanted to challenge things in religion and politics, and they wanted to challenge the monarchy. They wanted to challenge expression, writing, reading, agrarian reform, as I said, and lots more things. They wanted to bring in reform and change. They were like academic revolutionaries in a very controlled way. They were not individuals that wanted to dominate the world. And they didn't even necessarily ever express wanting to bring in an entirely new ideological paradigm for the world, although I'm sure that that passed through their thoughts. They thought that they were living in an oppressed, dark, difficult, poor society, and they wanted to motivate people to be something else. So in 1776, he gets 6 of his canon law student brothers at the university where they were employed basically to study canon law, and they formed this group. Now, when they formed this group, it was named a bunch of other things first, and then they finally set upon the name the Illuminati, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. But this secret society that came together, it came together there in the university, and what they just simply did was see this as the Age of Enlightenment, and it was. If you look at 1776, here's the birth of a new nation, the United States, which has a great number of Freemasons attached to it. But then you also, it's considered the Age of Enlightenment because now the British government, the monarchy there has been challenged by, the colonists and lost, and that new country is born. You have things going on in France. You have things going on in Germany, Bavaria. You have things going on in Spain. Everything is being challenged at this time. And these young intellectuals are pulling themselves together to try to, bring in this Age of enlightenment. They want to discuss rational thought and new science. And there are all kinds of secret societies forming. We know of 2 of them, Freemasonry and the Illuminati, but there were dozens of others that came and went, in the night. But there they were. That was the rationale there. So this entire ideology for them is tied to the term initiation, or the process of gathering together of knowledge that has been lost. That was what they're talking about. Lost how? Lost because there was no freedom of thought at the time. No freedom of reason or discussion, no freedom of religion, no freedom of expression, all the things that we've already discussed here, right? Everything's owned by the church, the state, the monarchy. So these individuals, 7 men, decide that in secret, they're going to read, discuss, embrace, ritualize, and take as a pathway toward improvement the ancient teachings, the ones that are lost to the religious status quo and forbidden on many levels, and they risk penalties of death, or imprisonment for revealing these things. So back to the school for mysticism, right? So gathering the knowledge lost or previously known became synonymous with enlightenment across the board in all of these things. And this group in particular, as well as Freemasonry, they were looking into the rituals of Egypt and Rome and ancient Greece, or ancient mysteries that were revived and returned to practice with modern interpretations that revolutionize thought, that open up thought free thought for humanity in a different way, instead of the dictums being set upon them by the church at the time. So remember what I've said about this revolutionary thing. Just remember it, because it's really important that you know that to understand the key aspects of this lecture. So he's born, John is, in the city of Ingolstadt in 1748. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Ingolstadt, okay? And as I said, he's now in the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order is what? Well, it's referred to as the Pope's army or the police. That's what the Jesuit order is. And they were ever present and they were ever powerful. His godfather, Baron von Ickstadt, is the guy who reads all the books, and he's the one that starts feeding this to Adam and his friends. So he becomes kind of the catalyst in this stuff. And the works are not evil at all. They're not evil. They're not satanic, and they're not dark. What they are is just not scripture, and they are not what the church is looking for, which is anything and only things that reinforce the scripture, the paradigm of the church, the protocol of the church, etc., the rituals of the church. So in 1768, at the age of 20, Weishaupt receives his Juris Doctorate in law, and then he becomes a professor of law at Ingolstadt, 1772 to 1773. And this is the time when Pope Clement XIV disbands the Jesuit order. Why? Because it started getting too powerful, and it started to buck and question what the Pope wanted to have happen, much like the Knights Templars were treated, which became one of the promulgating orders that brought on Freemasonry. The Pope decided that they were getting too powerful, too wealthy, too politically connected, too open and aware, and were bucking the dictates of the church. So he disbands the Jesuit order, and that opened this opportunity for Weishaupt to teach canon law at the university. So there's still a lot of Jesuits that are there, and there's Jesuit leaning in philosophies and individuals, etc. And they were not open to any kind of rebellion, but that's the environment now finds himself in. So before we leave it, again, setting the stage of the environment for these guys, these men felt they had no ownership of land or the buildings on it, no ownership of their own thoughts, no ownership of worship, not even of their souls, no freedom of study, no freedom of government, no freedom of what they read or what they might write. They had the burden of taxes paid to monarchs, the burden of tithing taxes paid to the church, no freedom to gather for any reason other than that which was approved by the monarchy, the state, or the church. Essentially, they felt they lived under a dualistic tyranny of church and state. So they live in a society in which everyone and everything is observed. You know, it was like the Gestapo, if you will. Everyone was encouraged to turn state's evidence or church evidence on anybody that was doing anything. So you ask yourself, why did they become secret societies or societies with secrets? That's the reason. Because if you were found out, you were going to be strung up on some tree or burned at the stake or drugged, between two plow horses until your arms came off. It was not a cool time. So these secret societies started to form. So the medieval philosophy that a new society can be created, that's what they were about. Here's what they called themselves: the perfectibilists. Yeah, stupid name, right? That would have been like calling yourself like Happy Meal or something, it was the perfectibilists. That is what they called themselves. So they get together. They know they're kind of being watched by the Jesuits, which are still left over, still ruling the university. But in May 1, 1776, he drafts the first statutes for a new secret society called the Perfectibilists. And he writes why this is needed. He does address the fact that he can be a powerful society and can have power over others without them even knowing it. Okay? Dangerous sentence there. And it is, of course, it's dangerous, which is why I wanted you to understand that. Anytime that kind of information becomes absorbed and moved around, and it's done so in secret to protect one's life, livelihood, career, but also when they're working in these secret societies, one can get this idea that you now are omnipotent and omniscient because of the information that you're pulling in, because you're now outside the confines of what the church says you can read, or what the monarch says, or what you can speak, or what you can write, what you can share. So the idea that they're saying, hey, we are going to be powerful and we can assert power over other people, but we have to understand it in a little literal way. That's what we have to do. We have to figure this out. So the perfectibilists are kind of anti-spiritual at this point. They're anti-Catholic for sure, and they are anti-government. So within a year, Weishaupt changes the name of his group to the Order of the Illuminati within a year. Illuminati meaning to illuminate with the light of knowledge. Okay, remember, this is the age of enlightenment. So the Order of the Illuminati is to illuminate with knowledge, right? Illuminate with the light of knowledge. There were 12 degrees, 12 stages of advancement in that knowledge. They did not involve human sacrifice. They were not sex rituals. They were not any of those kinds of things. They all were things that you had to do in order to grasp a new level of knowledge and be able to articulate and demonstrate that. And because at this particular time in the human history, rituals that were for secret societies always carried with them signs and countersigns. In other words, if you divulged the secrets of what you were involved in, there were supposed to be consequences. It's just what humans did then. So the very first class was called the Minerval class, okay? And that had 3 degrees in it. And it introduced the founding principles to the candidates. They were called candidates until they were indoctrinated into it. And the Minerval is derived from Minerva, which is the Greek goddess of wisdom. See the connection there? Not goddess of destruction or god of evil. It was Minerval, from Minerva, the Greek goddess of wisdom. So you become a novitiate degree, and they are brought to the lodge, which is nothing more than a meeting place in secret within the university. And the initiate, or the candidate, they know nothing about anything. They're brought by their initiator, meaning the person that's trying to bring them into the society. And that's the only name and the face they know. And that way, if they quit or they omit, they can't divulge any names of the other members. You understand why, right? That's why they're doing it. In the intel world, that's called a limited read-on, right? A limited read-on. You don't get the whole enchilada the first time you show up, because if you decide, I don't want to do that, now you know the whole enchilada. You know everything. So it's not how it works. It wasn't how it worked in 1778 either. So they're required to keep a journal called the Cubus Licet, which is an exact record of all correspondence between the candidate and the other members of the group. They are also given a cipher with which to further secret their teachings and thoughts. Now, you might find that ominous. I say enter into any sorority or fraternity anywhere, and you get the same kinds of things going on there. So,
do you know what the cipher was based on? Like a Caesarean cipher where you replace different words? Gematria?
Good question, and I don't.
Yeah.
I just know that they created a cipher, and they created the cipher so that any correspondence that they wrote, like in the Cubus Licet, this exact record of all the correspondence and dialogues, each initiate was to keep that, as was each initiator to keep this record. So this little group has now grown to about 10 or 12 members. And they're making it up as they go along. I really want to impress this upon everyone. They're making it up, They had the perfectibilists, and they were like, yeah, shit, that's a stupid name. So let's go, the Order of the Illuminati. Oh, that sounds cooler. So they're making up the rituals. They don't really know what they're doing. What are they copying from? They're copying from Freemasonry. And so Weishaupt gets this idea that, hey, instead of us all just sitting here by candlelight and making this crap up, I'm going to go become a Freemason at a local lodge in the city, and I'm going to steal their shit. I'm going to steal all their rituals. I'm going to learn all the things. And better yet, I'm going to find out who the powerful people are in this lodge. And if we get our stuff together where we're cool, and we look progressive, then we can steal all of them from the Masons and bring them over into our order of light and knowledge. So we're going to do that. So in 1777, Adam joins the Freemasons in this local city in Ingolstadt. And he only makes it to the 2nd degree. I mean, to do that, you basically show up and regurgitate 5 lines, and you're at 2nd degree, fellowcraft, And he goes, I can do this better, which was his intention to begin with, right? He goes, I can do this better. And if I do, I can take over all their members and bring them into the Illuminati. So now what are you starting to see happen here? And why are you starting to see it happen? Because now what is happening is it's sort of a tribal, it's sort of a fraternal, it's sort of a competition between men to see who can bring in and have the more powerful group, the more knowledgeable group. And what are the power things that they're looking for? They're looking for academics. They're looking for successful businessmen. They want to have politicians. They want to have all of those things because that insulates them to a certain degree and it also empowers them to a certain degree. It means they get more money in. And trust me, money was a deal here. They had to pay dues to belong to this, just like you have to when you're a member of a fraternity or if you're a Freemason, right? You have to pay dues to belong to these clubs. So he now comes to this critical point in the history of this. He's not a Freemason before now. He becomes an entered apprentice for a really nefarious reason, which is to steal the rituals, learn more about it. He figures he can do it better already. And he wants to gain access to the Masonic Lodge's library. He wants to find out what they're reading, what their source of illumination of knowledge is. He wants to observe the entered apprentice ritual so he can build around that and make it cooler. And he wants to gather the names and the identities of the lodge members for the purpose of convincing them to join his secret society. And he accomplishes this by chartering his own Masonic lodge, but didn't tell the Masonic leadership why he was there, of course. So this was the lodge of St. Theodore of Good Counsel. That was what the lodge that he was in there pirating, right? Copying everything, writing down the books and trying to get the books for his guys. So what do you learn from this? Aside from, forming a secret society for the reasons previously indicated, Adam sees this as an opportunity to capture power through increased membership. Freemasons are educated men, powerful men, often very wealthy men, especially in the 18th century Bavaria. And they already know the purpose and the reasons for a secret society. So you don't have to convince them. So why not invent one even better than Freemasonry and get them to come and join it? Also, membership, as I said, equates to dues, money with which to grow the group and entice more members. So the bottom line, the nefarious effort generates money and power, and perhaps nefarious in the context in which I am using it is to say, despite their ideology of knowledge for the purpose of advancing humanity or people in their realm and diminishing the monarchies and the state, in other words, and the power of the church, they're figuring out very quickly that the only way they're going to be able to do that is to empower themselves. They're not going to be able to do it as 12 guys meeting by candlelight in some storeroom in a Jesuit university, right? So this becomes his intention to build the success of the Illuminati as it expands and grows and evolves by recruiting from this lodge of unsuspecting Masonic members. So he's married at this point, and his wife passes in 1780. And in 1780, right around that same time, while Weishaupt is in mourning, a guy out of the Freemasonry group, von Knigge, he's brought into, it's Baron Adolf von Knigge. He joins the Illuminati because Weishaupt, introduces him into it, says this is going to be really good. And many of the records that I read indicated that kind of how he pitched this to him was, we're going to be more powerful than Freemasonry. And so we're going to have better people than Freemasonry. And we want you to come over because you're powerful. You're very knowledgeable. People respect you. And if you're over here with us, get in on the ground floor of this new society, right? Kind of like an MLM, get in on the ground floor so you can extend the downline with us kind of deal. So this Baron is well known as a Freemason and a master ritualist, which takes place in Freemasonry. And he's got a lot of power and influence. And he's highly prized individual at that time for the Illuminati. He's charismatic, he's ambitious, connected politically, financially, and he's active in all of the lodges in Germany, the state, and Bavaria, which is a state in Germany. So now it's clear this group of less than, it's starting out with 7 guys. Now it's growing, and now it's 50 and then 75 men in total. And remember that 50 to 75 men now, because they're pulling in these guys. So von Knigi, this baron in the inner circle, he's a guy that now starts working and rewriting the second degree of the Minerval class. So the Minerval degree, the candidate's placed into a dark room by his godfather or his initiate, right? Initiator, and given one or more chances to leave and go no further. If he decides to remain and go forward, he surrenders his sword and cap to the godfather. And we're going to use godfather and an initiator synonymously. Then he is given the Minerval modes of recognition, the secret passphrases, a secret grip, the secret sign, and the oath of secrecy. The same thing that happens in Freemasonry. The same thing that happens in the temple work in the LDS Church. The same thing that happens in many fraternities and sororities. The same kind of thing. The sign of the nail, all these other grips and things that they do, which are just part of the ritual. Why do we engage in ritual? Ritual is important to humanity because by engaging in the ritual, it allows us to connect into that collective, unconscious waveform knowledge and experience of that throughout all time. That's why. Why do you take the Eucharist in the Catholic Church? Because in so doing, it's a symbolic connection with all who have come before you, right on to the Last Supper, right? The first time it was allegedly done. That's the reason. Because you connect then on an energetic and spiritual, intellectual level. That's why these rituals are there. Not for any other reason other than to them it's cool. It's cool because we think now we can manage the members of our society, secret society, which is BS. I mean, come on. You're not going to. I mean, somebody will leak it out. I mean, you can right now know everything that there is about anything in Freemasonry by, you can look it up on the internet and get the whole thing. So it's not that. But there, at that time, this was just keeping pace with what we've been saying they're trying to do. So they get these modes of recognition, the passphrases, secret grip, secret signs, the oath of secrecy, and then the Minerval jewel, symbolizing entry into the early stages of enlightenment, of knowledge. The Illuminati, right, is placed around the initiate's neck. The disc of gold, suspended by a green satin ribbon, has upon its face the owl of Minerva sitting atop an open book with the letters PMCV, meaning per me casi vigent. Through me, the blind become sighted. Yeah, my Latin sucks. Haven't done that since high school. Through me, the blind become sighted. Clearly a reference back to the New Testament as well, right? So then the initiate's hat and sword are returned, which is ritual, because they are disarmed, standing in the dark, disarmed, and now they are rearmed, and they sign the minutes book to officially log their name into the secret order of the Illuminati. And if he divulges names, he divulges his own as well. That was the reason they had to put their name into the book. Do you see that? They try to throw that in as a ritualistic insurance policy that if you divulge the name of other people in the group, your name is in the book as well. So you'll suffer the same consequences. So Freemasons are a society of secrets, but the Illuminati is building itself quite literally as a secret society, a different thing. So the next thing that happens is the Illuminatus minor. And this is where the candidate is brought to the third degree and is told to observe the pyramid. Same thing happens in Freemasonry. And the pyramid is the symbol of the illustrious order, their illustrious order, as they point out. So just pause play for a minute here and let's do a reality check. One of the great conspiratorial points of interest in the theory of secret cabals, driving the universe of man, as is illustrated by the all-seeing eye over the pyramid on the dollar bill, and in the symbology throughout the United States and Europe, is the pyramid. So herein, the members must join forces, working for the attainment of the honor of the supreme architect, meaning the creator, God, the higher power. So the supreme architect and the happiness to attain happiness for the world. And this is why you find the letters on either side of the pyramid, D and P, Deo, Proximo, or closer to God. And there is a symbol of the goddess Minerva's head atop the body of the Minerval owl. And it is indicative of gaining wisdom. Now, if you're listening and you're thinking about what we're talking about here, closer to God, attaining wisdom, gaining wisdom, etc., none of this, talking about the supreme architect, none of this is evil. These are individuals trying to empower themselves with knowledge, the light of knowledge, and trying to figure out how they're now going to use that to not only change themselves, but change others and change their country, change the church. And oh yeah, in so doing that, everybody's got to earn a living. We want people to join and pay dues. Okay? I mean, that is always this underlying process here. And again, I told you they're making this up as they go along. So this baron that they recruited in from Freemasonry, they're all sitting down and creating this stuff. They're writing these rituals out. They're taking what they know from Freemasonry, they're building upon it, they're throwing out stuff they think stinks, and they're putting cooler stuff in there because they want to attract members. That's what they want to do. So I just want to recap. This is here we're talking about, an organization that began after or during the formation of the United States. And by 1760s, 13 British colonies contained 2.5 million people and were established along the Atlantic coast, eastern seaboard, east of the Appalachian Mountains. After defeating France, the British government imposes a series of taxes, including the Stamp Act of 1765, rejecting the colonists' constitutional argument that new taxes needed their approval. Resistance to these taxes, especially the Boston Tea Party in 1773, led to what? Parliament issuing punitive laws designed to end self-government. Armed conflict began in Massachusetts in 1775. In 1776, in Philadelphia, the Second Continental Congress declared the independence of the colonies as the United States. And led by George Washington, it won the Revolutionary War. The peace treaty of 1783 established the borders of a new nation. The Articles of Confederation established a central government, but it was ineffectual at providing stability as it could not collect taxes and had no executive officer. The convention wrote a new constitution that was adopted in 1789. A Bill of Rights was added in 1791 to guarantee inalienable rights, right? And my point is, as you're going to see, the Illuminati had nothing to do with pyramid symbology in the US or in Europe. But you're going to have to wait for that. I'm getting there. Okay. Mm-hmm. Freemasonry, they exercised a great deal of influence, but not the Illuminati. So von Carnegie and Weishaupt, wrote John Adams and Ben Franklin. They wrote them a letter because why? They wanted to get the hell out of Europe. They wanted to get out of Germany, Bavaria, and they wanted to get out from under the church, and they wanted to get out from under the monarchy, and they wanted to come to a place where there really it was freedom of religion, more or less, and freedom of expression, more or less, certainly more than in Europe. And it was a brand new place to be. No monarchy. This was fertile ground to get over there and be part of this. So they wrote John Adams and Ben Franklin when they were in Paris on behalf of the fledgling colonies warring against Europe. And they wanted to trying to get the French more involved in the war. And Carnegie and Weishaupt wanted to establish the 14th colony in the Americas. And they were going to call it Elysium. That's what they were going to call it, which is, if you ever remember, Russell Crowe in The Gladiator, he says, if you find the sun on your face, be not afraid because you're already dead and you're in Elysium, right? So, why? Well, for freedom, of course, remember that they were in existence for the first place for freedom. And they associated the liberties of early American Republic as heaven to them. So guess what? it didn't happen. Adams and Franklin did not allow them to come over and be the 14th colony, which you all know because there wasn't one. And it wasn't because they were evil. It was because they selected a place for Elysium along the Savannah River, where in the Battle of Charleston, the entire southern colonies were cut off and a new colony could not actually happen. And they had no money either. And the United States, the new government, were over begging money from the Dutch. Okay. Adams was begging money from the Dutch alone so they could actually start a treasury and start to grow the country. And these guys, the Illuminati, they had moths in their pockets. They didn't have money and they didn't have influence, and they didn't want to bring them over. They outlined, the area in the Savannah River, not a good choice. And they used all of that, the fact that they were broke and the fact that they had chosen the wrong place, and they just said, no, you can't come. So back to the Illuminatus Minor, to a degree, it's called beware of falling from your high place. That's the oath of the Illuminatus Minor. And the key here is that you had also to be a master mason in Freemasonry in order to get to this degree. Again, remember, they're parallels. The Illuminati guys are stealing from Freemasonry. So this parallel is already there. So it's an important element of keeping Freemasonry and the Illuminati entwined, because they were parallel efforts. So at this time in Illuminati history, there's a new enemy that rises up. It's called a Rosicrucian group, calling themselves the Order of the Golden and Rosy Cross. And they are also a secret society, but they believe in the ultimate goal of the universal reformation of man by studying and mastering the metaphysical laws of the universe, by combining ritual practices of alchemy, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and Christian Gnosticism. And they are now a threat to the Illuminati order because they are in the same area rising up. And this whole Rosicrucian group, they believe in a very mystical approach to Christianity, and the core of the wars between these two philosophies, the Illuminati and the Rosicrucians, was what? Membership. So that was the war again. It was about membership. It was about dues. It was about collecting names and faces and power and individuals that, that could make things happen. So it's money and power. And this is the end goal of these secret societies, but not the Society of Secrets Freemasonry. That was never Freemasonry's objective, but it was the objective of all these new fledgling societies that were coming up. So the Freemasonic class that von Kriege now begins a strict and dangerous effort to recruit and train special Freemasons that can bring more and more other Freemasons comfortably into the Illuminati. I mean, this is secret society against secret society, trying to, as I said, just pirate people away. They were just trying to poach them away from Freemasons and bring them over into Illuminati. And this Baron revised aspects of the Masonic rituals, but did not harmonize. What he started to do was deharmonize the ideology that Weishaupt was trying to teach. So you had a guy who was very powerful in Freemasonry, now teamed up with Adam Weishaupt, but now they're starting to have a little bit of an acrimonious relationship. So the Baron is trying to attract the money needed for the Illuminati order by attracting more Freemasons. And at this point, Weishaupt is, hey, we just need to focus on writing our own stuff, get our own shit together, and people will want to come over here and do it. I mean, I know I poached you over here to do this, but you're supposed to be helping me write this thing so we can get all this done. But the Baron's focus was, now I'm going to go straight for the guys and bring them in here. Why should I be helping you write it when I could get 10 others in here that help write this stuff that have been Freemasons for decades, right? So these Illuminati rituals were darker than the practice of the Freemasonry. I mean, in the Illuminati rituals, there were more threats, there were more swords, so there were a lot of darker twists, but still keeping, with the moral of the story and the objective here, what they were trying to do was enlighten themselves. So still, there were no sacrifices. Remember, this is all ritual, but the rituals involve, I promise to do this, to reach this state, to do this kind of thing. And if I don't do that, or if I divulge these secrets, here are the consequences which I acknowledge to have happened to me. And those consequences are things that if you hear them today, you kind of think like, well, who gives a shit about that? I mean, they were doing things like your body will be buried at the edge of the sea in sand, meaning you will not have a permanent resting place. That is what you say. If I violate this oath, if I, do this, do that, that I acknowledge that my body, will be buried at the edge between sea and sand, meaning you're in a place that is not sanctified ground. You are in a place where you're in constant fluid motion, tied somewhere between the earth and the sea, okay? Which at that time could also be interpreted as the sky, okay? So, for example, they had the worshipful master can cause the candidate of the degree to hold the compass to his left breast, right? And the worshipful master can strike the compass 3 times with a wooden gavel and drive the compass points into the breast and actually break the skin with it. That was the Illuminati. That doesn't happen in Freemasonry. So they were always just pushing it a little bit further, not because they were evil, but pushing it further because they wanted to make it special, unique, and difficult to get into and stay in, etc. So they're entered apprentice, same as Freemasonry. And the Illuminati entered apprentice was the same as Freemasonry with this caveat. You advanced into the tip of a sword held by the worshipful master. You didn't do that in Freemasonry. But in the Illuminati entered apprentice, you put your breast against the sword that's held by the worshipful master. Now, is he driving it into your breast? No. He's not poking a hole in you, but it is the symbology of doing that. The fellowcraft, okay, same as Freemasonry, but with this caveat, the worshipful master exclaims, draw your sword only in defense of the order. So draw your sword in defense of the order. That is not brought forward in Freemasonry. There is no drawing a weapon to defend the order. It is all about your choosing this path of study and worship and understanding and enlightenment. And you are not supposed to expose the ritual. And if you do, then there are these consequences. But in theirs, you're actually drawing your sword under the instruction of the worshipful master, because part of the ritual is to understand you're drawing it in defense of the order. Enter our master mason, same as Freemasonry, with this caveat. The worshipful master can and does strike the candidate with the wooden mallet in the forehead, and the doors of death are lined with the points of the sword, is the verbiage used. So again, remember, this didn't come from, hell or from some demon somewhere. This is guys, young, inexperienced guys who were not even Freemasons, but are stealing this to try, and what they're trying to do is make their secret society more important and more unique, to try to separate themselves from Freemasonry or the Rosicrucians order. So when you get into the Illuminatus Major or Scottish Novitiate, okay, the Baron, he alters this considerably and transitions from mortality to inner reflection, okay? And then there's the next level, which is Illuminatus Dirigens, or the Scottish Knight. And dirigens means to direct or steer in this usage. So again, the Baron, he alters the Masonic ritual to meet his objectives. And this is where the real deviousness of Adam Weishaupt begins to show. He starts to feel like the Baron, Knigi, is taking shit over. He's starting to steal the show. And he's putting it in a place where it's getting, in his opinion, not parallel to, but more violent. Drawing swords and points of swords by the worshipful master and all these different kinds of things. So the story and legend is based on the 1340 Battle of Bannockburn in Scotland, where the exiled Templar Knights fought alongside Robert the Bruce. But in Freemasonry, that's what the Baron is coming up. But in Freemasonry, the degree, Illuminatus Dirigens, or Scottish Knight, this degree is used to instill knightly virtues within the initiate. See the difference? So one guy's now trying to initiate the violence of the battle that took place in Scotland in 1314, where Templar Knights fought alongside Robert Bruce. But the Freemasonry ritual, that degree is used to instill knightly virtues. In other words, again, back to what Freemasonry was about, which was to teach you how to be a better man, how to be a better man in the world, to understand knightly virtues and how to live like a knight. But that's not what Carnegie and Weishaupt wanted it to be. They want it to be a secret network of Illuminati spies that will use higher levels of aggression to infiltrate and spy on Freemasons, on all the Freemason lodges across Germany. And it is said that Adam and Ben Franklin and even George Washington all got word of what was starting to happen there, which is another reason why they were never invited to come and be a part of who we were as we were developing and growing and expanding as a government in the new United States. Because these guys now were feeling like they were losing ground, and they were feeling like they weren't getting enough powerful people within the organization. So they were getting higher and more aggressive, or rather more violent and more aggressive, and training their initiates not to have knightly values, right? Or those kinds of things. Now what they're looking for is, can I train spies to infiltrate into Freemasonry?
I actually think that's a good time to end the episode and move to the next part.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.